was setting the table for dinner when Robert walked through the door with her. Not alone. Not apologetic. With Tessa hanging on his arm like she belonged there. In the house I'd kept clean for 40 years. She wore a white sundress that cost more than my monthly grocery budget. Before we continue, comment where you're watching from. And subscribe to the channel. We'd love to see how far our stories are reaching. I knew because I'd seen the credit card statement 3 days earlier. Our joint account? My money, technically, since I'd been the one managing every dollar we ever earned. Joanne, we need to talk, Robert said. He didn't even look at me. Just walked past, trailing that coconut perfume Tessa wore, the kind that probably came in bottles shaped like tropical fruit. Dylan was already sitting in the living room, my son, 35 years old, wearing the watch I'd bought him for his college graduation. He wouldn't meet my eyes either. I dried my hands on the dish towel. My grandmother's dish towel, actually. The yellow one with the daisies that had faded to almost white from washing. I'd used it to dry Dylan's baby bottles once. Now he sat on my couch, looking at his phone while his father prepared to detonate my life. You can say whatever you need to say right here, I told Robert. My voice came out steady. I was proud of that. Robert cleared his throat. He'd practiced this. I could tell by the way he positioned himself near the fireplace, one hand in his pocket like some CEO about to deliver quarterly results. I'm moving out. Tessa and I have found a place together. The air conditioner kicked on. I heard it rattle in the window, that loose screw I'd been meaning to tighten for months. Funny what you notice when your marriage is ending. I see, I said. Don't make this harder than it needs to be, Robert continued. He'd gained weight over the years, but he still stood like he owned every room he entered. The truth is, Joanne, you never had any ambition. You were content to just exist. Tessa understands drive. She has goals. Tessa smiled. Actually smiled. Her teeth were very white. I thought about the spreadsheets upstairs in my desk drawer. 40 years of spreadsheets, documenting every property Robert had bought, every mortgage I'd negotiated, every tax form I'd filed. 11 properties, all registered in my name because Robert had tax liens back in 1985 that he'd never quite explained. For protection, he'd said. Just temporary. Temporary had lasted 4 decades. Mom, Dylan finally spoke. His voice was soft, apologetic even, but he was still sitting there, wasn't he? Still on their side of this room. Dad's been unhappy for a long time. You have to understand. What I understand, I said slowly, is that your father is 65 years old and apparently having a midlife crisis 20 years too late. This isn't a crisis, Robert snapped. This is me finally choosing happiness. You got comfortable, Joanne. You stopped trying. Look at you. I looked down at myself. Jeans from Target. A blue sweater with a small stain near the hem from where I'd spilled coffee last Tuesday. My hair needed cutting. My hands were dry from dish soap because I was too cheap to buy the good lotion. 62 years old and nothing to show for it but a clean house and a faithless husband. I stopped trying? I repeated. The laugh that came out surprised even me. I managed every dollar you earned for 40 years. I kept this house running. I raised our son while you built your real estate empire. My empire, Robert corrected. My properties. The properties in my name. The room went quiet. Even the air conditioner seemed to hold its breath. Robert's face changed, just slightly, a tightening around his eyes. Those were always meant to be split between us. You know that. Do I? Tessa shifted on her expensive shoes, red heels. I wondered if she knew that Robert hated the color red, or maybe he'd changed. Maybe with her he was a different person, a better person, someone who liked red heels and coconut perfume and women young enough to be his daughter. I'm taking my keys, Robert said. He pulled them from his pocket, the ring I'd given him on our 20th anniversary. Silver, engraved with our initials. He worked my house key off the ring and held it out. I assume you'll want this back. I didn't take it, just watched as he set it on the coffee table, next to the coaster that said World's Best Dad, that Dylan had made in 3rd grade. We'll work out the details with lawyers, Robert continued. I'm being fair, Joanne. More than fair. But I'm done pretending this marriage is something it isn't. Dylan stood up. He was leaving with them. Of course he was. I'll call you later, Mom, he said. But he wouldn't. We both knew it. They walked out through the front door, the three of them. Robert didn't look back. Tessa did, just once, and I saw something in her face. Not quite triumph, more like curiosity. Like she was studying me, trying to understand what kind of woman lets herself become invisible. I heard Robert's truck start up, the same truck I'd co-signed for in 2019 when his credit was bad again. The sound faded down Maple Street, past the Hendersons' house with the blue shutters, past the corner where the stop sign was bent from where someone hit it last winter. The house was very quiet. I walked to the window and watched the taillights disappear. My reflection stared back at me in the glass. 62 years old, invisible, ambitionless. I thought about the 11 properties. The strip mall on Bancroft Street that brought in $8,000 a month. The duplex near the university that Robert had bought for $45,000 in 1992, now worth $320,000. The empty lot on Highway 475 that developers had been calling about for 3 years. All in my name, all mine. I pulled out my phone and scrolled through my contacts until I found her. Karen Chen, the real estate attorney who'd handled my mother's estate last year. She'd given me her card and told me to call if I ever needed anything. I pressed dial. Karen? This is Joanne Delaney. I need to talk to you about selling some properties. My hand was shaking, but my voice was steady. After 40 years, I was finally going to have some ambition. Karen Chen called me back 3 hours later with numbers that made my hands go cold. Conservative estimate? You're looking at $2 million for all 11 properties, she said. I heard her typing in the background. But if we wait for the right buyer, maybe closer to $4. $7 million. That lot on Highway 475 alone is worth $890,000. There's a developer who's been circling it for months. I sat down on the kitchen floor. Just sat right down on the linoleum I'd mopped that morning, my back against the cabinet where I kept the good dishes we never used. $4.7 million. In my name. Robert had always told me the properties were worth maybe $2 million, combined. Modest investments, he'd called them. Nothing spectacular, but they'll keep us comfortable in retirement. Comfortable. That was Robert's favorite word. He'd kept me comfortable, kept me small, kept me from asking too many questions about numbers I'd been trained not to understand, even though I'd been the one filling out the tax forms for 40 years. Joanne? You still there? I'm here, I said. How fast can we move on this? If you're serious, I can have preliminary paperwork ready by Monday. But I have to ask. Does your husband know you're doing this? He's not my husband anymore, I said. And no, he doesn't. We talked for 20 more minutes. Karen explained trust structures, capital gains tax, something called a 1031 exchange that I only half understood. My head was spinning by the end, but one thing was crystal clear. The properties were legally mine. Robert had no claim to them, none. I was still sitting on the kitchen floor when Dylan's truck pulled into the driveway. I heard his footsteps on the porch, heavy and deliberate. He had a key. I'd never asked for it back, even after he'd moved out 6 years ago. Mom? He found me in the kitchen, still on the floor. Jesus, are you okay? Did you fall? I'm fine. I stood up, brushing off my jeans. Just thinking. He looked uncomfortable. Dylan had his father's eyes, but he'd gotten my mouth, the same thin upper lip that disappeared when we were nervous. His was disappearing now. Look, I know Dad's timing was awful, coming here with Tessa like that. But Mom, you have to understand where he's coming from. Do I? He's been unhappy for years. You know that. And Tessa. She's actually really nice once you get to know her. I moved to the coffee maker. My hands needed something to do. How long have you known about her? Dylan shifted his weight. About 8 months. 8 months. My son had known for 8 months that his father was cheating, and he'd said nothing. Had sat across from me at Sunday dinners, helping himself to the pot roast I'd made, talking about his work at the insurance firm, never once mentioning that my marriage was ending while I passed him the mashed potatoes. Why didn't you tell me? Dad asked me not to. He said he needed time to figure things out. And honestly, Mom, I thought maybe it would blow over. The coffee maker gurgled. I watched it drip, thick and dark. But it didn't blow over. No. And now he needs you to be reasonable about the divorce settlement. There it was, the real reason for this visit. Reasonable, I repeated. Dylan pulled out a chair and sat down at the kitchen table, the same table where I'd helped him with his homework, where we'd celebrated his college acceptance, where Robert had announced just hours ago that I lacked ambition. The properties, Mom. Dad's lawyer says half of them should go to him. Community property and all that. It's only fair. I poured my coffee. Didn't offer Dylan any. Those properties are in my name. Because of some tax thing from the 80s, Dad explained it to me. It was just paperwork. They were always supposed to be both of yours, were they? Mom, don't do this. Don't make this ugly. Dylan leaned forward, his elbows on the table. Dad's willing to let you keep the house. He thinks that's fair. You get the house, he gets half the properties. Clean split. I sipped my coffee. It was too hot and burned my tongue. And what do you get, Dylan? His face changed. Just for a second. A flash of something guilty. What do you mean? What did your father promise you if you convinced me to cooperate? That's not... Mom, it's not like that. What did he promise you? Dylan stood up. He was taller than his father, broader through the shoulders. He'd played football in high school. Linebacker. I'd gone to every game, even the ones in the rain. Robert had missed most of them. Business meetings. The duplex near the university, Dylan said quietly. He said once the divorce is settled, if things go smoothly, he'd sign the duplex over to me. For my kids. When I have kids. The duplex I'd managed for 30 years. The one where I'd dealt with broken water heaters at midnight. Where I'd painted walls and replaced carpets and chased down late rent checks. The duplex worth $320,000. I see. It's not a bribe, Mom. It's just Dad wants to take care of me. Is that so wrong? With my property. It's not your property. Not really. You know that. I set my coffee cup down. Very carefully. Very slowly. Get out. Mom. Get out of my house, Dylan. He stared at me. I'd never spoken to him like that before. Never raised my voice. Never drawn a line he couldn't cross. I'd been a good mother. Patient. Understanding. Flexible. Comfortable. You're being unreasonable, he said. I'm being ambitious. Isn't that what your father wanted? Dylan grabbed his keys from the table. Fine. But when you're sitting here alone because you drove everyone away over money, don't call me crying about it. He left through the back door, slammed it hard enough that the dishes rattled in the cabinet. I stood at the window and watched him drive away. The street was empty now. Friday evening. Most people were inside with their families, having dinner, watching television, living their comfortable lives. My phone buzzed. A text from my sister Sharon. Dylan told me what you're doing. This is so typical of you, Joanne. Always the victim. Robert deserves to be happy. Stop being selfish. Sharon. My younger sister by 4 years. The pretty one, the social one, the one who'd married a dentist and lived in a subdivision with a swimming pool. The one who'd always resented that I'd inherited Mother's engagement ring. I deleted the text without responding. Another message came through, this one from a number I didn't recognize. Hi, Joanne. It's Tessa. I know this is awkward, but I wanted to reach out woman to woman. Robert loves you. He'll always love you, but sometimes love isn't enough. I hope you can find it in your heart to let him go gracefully. He's given you 40 good years. Don't ruin his future because you're hurting. That's not who you are. I read it 3 times. The presumption of it, the manipulation, the calculated kindness designed to make me feel small and bitter and unreasonable. That's not who you are. But she didn't know who I was. Nobody did. I'd been so busy being comfortable that I'd forgotten to be anything else. I opened my email and started typing. Karen, I'm ready to move forward. Please contact the developer about the Highway 475 lot. And let's list the others as quickly as possible. I want everything sold within 90 days. I hit send before I could second-guess myself. My phone rang immediately. Robert's name flashing on the screen. I watched it ring once, twice, 3 times. Then I silenced it and set the phone face down on the counter. Outside, the streetlights were coming on. One by one, they flickered to life down Maple Street. the Hendersons' porch light, the Kramers' driveway lamp. My own front porch, where the bulb needed replacing but Robert had never gotten around to it. I'd replace it myself tomorrow. Tonight, I poured another cup of coffee and pulled out my laptop. Karen had sent me a list of documents she'd need: property deeds, tax records, mortgage information. 40 years of paperwork documenting an empire built on my name and my credit and my invisible labor. Robert called 4 more times before midnight. I didn't answer. Dylan sent a text. "Mom, please. Dad's freaking out. Just talk to him." Sharon sent another. "You're being vindictive and cruel. Mother would be ashamed." I turned off my phone and worked through the night, organizing files, making copies, building a case for ownership I'd never questioned until tonight. At 3 in the morning, I found a folder marked Personal, 1985. Inside were letters between Robert and his accountant, discussing how to protect his assets from potential creditors by transferring everything to his wife's name. "She won't ask questions," Robert had written. "She trusts me completely." I read that line 5 times. She trusts me completely. Past tense now, past life. I added the letters to Karen's pile and kept working. The house was too quiet. 3 weeks had passed since Dylan walked out of my kitchen. 21 days of silence. No calls from my son. No visits from Sharon. Even the neighbors seemed to be avoiding me. Mrs. Henderson waved from her porch but didn't come over to chat like she used to. The mailman left packages by the door instead of ringing the bell. I'd become a ghost in my own neighborhood. Karen called every few days with updates. The developer had made an offer on the Highway 475 lot. Good offer. $920,000. Even more than her initial estimate. 2 of the rental properties had interested buyers. The strip mall on Bancroft had 3 potential offers pending inspection. "Things are moving faster than I expected," Karen said during our Tuesday morning call. "You're sitting on a gold mine, Joanne. Robert must have been insane to let you keep these in your name." "He didn't think I'd ever use them," I said. "His loss." I hung up and walked through the empty house. Every room held 40 years of memories I didn't want anymore. The living room where Robert had told me I lacked ambition. The kitchen where Dylan had chosen his father over me. The bedroom where I'd slept alone for 3 weeks now, sprawled in the middle of the mattress because I could. I should have felt liberated. Instead, I felt hollow. My phone stayed mostly silent. A few spam calls. A reminder about my dentist appointment. Nothing from Dylan. Nothing from Sharon. Robert had stopped calling after the first week, but his lawyer had started sending letters. Formal, threatening, demanding I cease any property transactions until marital assets could be properly adjudicated. I threw the letters away unopened after the 3rd one. On Thursday afternoon, I drove to the storage unit where I'd been keeping old files. Robert never came here. He didn't even know I had a storage unit. I'd rented it 5 years ago when the basement flooded, moved boxes of old paperwork here, and never got around to moving them back. The unit smelled like cardboard and dust. I pulled the chain on the overhead bulb and started going through boxes, looking for the financial records Karen needed. What I found was worse. Box after box of notebooks. My notebooks. 40 years of careful record-keeping. Every property purchase documented in my neat handwriting. Every mortgage payment, every renovation, every tenant complaint and repair and late rent notice. I'd managed everything, documented everything, while Robert took credit for building his real estate empire. I sat on the concrete floor and opened a notebook from 1987. March 15th, I'd written, "Bancroft property needs new roof. Called 3 contractors. Best estimate $8,400. Used money from my inheritance to cover down payment. Robert says he'll pay me back when the strip mall starts generating income. He'd never paid me back." I flipped through more pages. June 1989. Robert wants to buy the duplex near university. Bank won't approve him. Credit score too low. Using my name again. My signature. My credit. August 1992. Vacant lot on Highway 475. Robert says it's a long-term investment. 20-year plan. Putting it in my name for tax purposes. January 1998. Robert's business partner called asking about unpaid invoices. Robert said to ignore him. Said he's handling it. But I saw the certified letters. He's not handling anything. page after page, year after year. My handwriting getting smaller, tighter, more controlled. The handwriting of a woman documenting everything because some part of her knew she'd need proof someday. I'd been keeping evidence for 40 years without realizing it. My hands were shaking when I pulled out my phone and took pictures. Every page, every note. Every record of money I'd spent, credit I'd extended, labor I'd performed while Robert played businessman. Then I found the envelope. It was wedged in the bottom of a box marked Personal, 1990s. Thick manila envelope, unsealed. Inside were bank statements from an account I didn't recognize. Robert's name on the account. But the address was wrong. Not our house. Some apartment in Sylvania, 20 minutes away. I looked at the dates, 1996 through 1998, regular deposits, $200 every month, always on the first of the month, always cash, rent payments. Robert had maintained a separate apartment for 2 years in the 90s. While I was home with 8-year-old Dylan, making dinners and checking homework and keeping the books for properties I didn't know I owned, Robert had been paying rent on an apartment I'd never seen. I felt sick. There were more papers in the envelope. Credit card statements, charges at restaurants I'd never been to, jewelry stores, a florist. Valentine's Day, 1997. Flowers sent to an address in Sylvania. Not our address. This wasn't Robert's first affair. Tessa wasn't his first younger woman. She was just the first one he'd been honest about. I sat in that storage unit until the sun went down and the overhead bulb was the only light. My phone died. I didn't care. I just kept reading through the evidence of a marriage that had been a lie longer than I'd known. When I finally locked up and drove home, it was after 9. The house was dark. I'd forgotten to leave the porch light on. I fumbled with my keys in the darkness, my hands still shaking. Inside, I plugged in my phone and watched it come back to life. 17 missed calls, 12 from numbers I didn't recognize, 5 from Robert, and 1 voicemail from Dylan. I almost deleted it without listening, but some part of me, the mother part that couldn't quite die, made me press play. Mom. His voice was rough, tired. I know you're not taking calls. I don't blame you, but I need you to know something. Dad's been calling me every day, asking if I've talked to you. Asking if I can convince you to stop selling the properties. And today he offered me $50,000 if I could get you to sign papers giving him power of attorney over your assets. There was a long pause. I heard traffic in the background. He was calling from his car. I told him no. I told him to stop calling me. I told him what he's doing is wrong and I'm done helping him. Another pause. Longer this time. I'm sorry, Mom. I'm so sorry. I chose the wrong side. I let him manipulate me with promises of property and money, and I threw away my relationship with my mother for it. That makes me just like him. And I don't want to be like him anymore. The message ended. I played it again. Then again. My son. My complicated, flawed, redeemable son. I called him back. He answered on the first ring. Mom, I'm here. I'm so sorry. I know saying it doesn't fix anything, but I need you to know. Dylan. I cut him off. I need you to do something for me. Anything. Come to the house tomorrow. I have something to show you. The next morning, Dylan sat at my kitchen table while I spread out the notebooks. The bank statements, the credit card bills, the evidence of 40 years of invisible labor, and 25 years of documented lies. He didn't say anything for a long time, just read, page after page, his face getting paler with each new revelation. This apartment, he finally said, pointing to the 1996 bank statements. I was 8 years old. God, Mom, you were home with me every day, making my lunches, helping with my homework. And he was living a separate life, I finished. Yes. Dylan pushed back from the table and walked to the window. His shoulders were shaking. I defended him, he whispered. I called you selfish. I chose him over you. You didn't know. I should have known. I should have trusted you. I stood up and moved beside him. We looked out at the backyard together. The grass needed mowing. Robert had always handled the yard work. Now it was wild, overgrown, returning to nature. What are you going to do? Dylan asked. I thought about the developer's offer, the interested buyers. The empire built on my name and my credit and my invisible labor. I'm going to sell everything, I said. Every property, every building, every piece of land Robert thought was his, and then I'm going to be free. Dylan turned to look at me, really look at me, maybe for the first time in years. Can I help? I reached out and took my son's hand. Yes, I said. You can. The developer's name was Marcus Webb. He was 43 years old, wore expensive suits, and had built half the new condominiums in Toledo over the past decade. Karen had arranged the meeting for Wednesday morning at her office downtown. Dylan drove me. He'd been coming by the house every day for the past week, helping me organize files, making copies of documents, being present in a way he hadn't been in years. We didn't talk much about Robert. There wasn't much left to say. Marcus stood when we entered Karen's conference room. Firm handshake, direct eye contact. He had the confidence of a man who knew how to read property values and human desperation in equal measure. Mrs. Delaney, thank you for meeting with me. He gestured to the leather chairs around the polished table. I've been following your properties for 3 years now, that Highway 475 lot in particular. It's exactly what I need for my next project. What kind of project? I asked. He pulled out a laptop and turned it toward me. Architectural renderings filled the screen. Glass towers, luxury condominiums, green spaces and walking paths. The kind of development that transformed neighborhoods and made developers very rich. I'm calling it the Heights at Toledo. 42 units, 3 buildings. Starting price $425,000 per unit. He clicked through more images. The Highway 475 lot is perfect for the 3rd building, but I need to move fast. I have investors ready, contractors on standby. If you're willing to sell, I can close within 30 days. How much? Karen asked. For the lot alone? $920,000? Cash. Marcus leaned back. But I'm also interested in your other properties, Mrs. Delaney. The strip mall on Bancroft, the duplex near the university, some of the rental houses. If you're looking to liquidate your entire portfolio, I can make you an offer on the complete package. I looked at Dylan. He was watching me, waiting. What kind of offer? Marcus smiled. $4.3 million for everything. Closing in 60 days. All cash, no contingencies. I'll handle the tenant relocations, take care of any outstanding issues. You walk away clean. Karen's pen was flying across her notepad. She looked up at me, one eyebrow raised. It was a good offer. Maybe even a great offer. I'll need 24 hours, I said. Of course. Marcus pulled out a business card. But I should mention, time is sensitive. I have other opportunities, other locations. If you're not ready to move forward, I need to know soon. We left the office at noon. Dylan and I sat in his truck in the parking garage, not starting the engine. That's a lot of money, Mom, he said quietly. It is. Are you sure about this? Once you sell, you can't take it back. I thought about Robert's face when he'd walked into my house with Tessa, the casual cruelty of it. The assumption that I'd be too weak, too comfortable, too broken to fight back. I'm sure. That night, I called Marcus Webb and accepted his offer. The next morning, my phone started ringing before 7. Robert. I sent it to voicemail. He called again, and again. By the time I'd finished my coffee, he'd called 6 times. Then the text started. Joanne, we need to talk. Now. You can't do this. Those properties are ours. My lawyer says you're selling without my consent. This is illegal. Call me back or I'm coming over. I blocked his number. At 10 o'clock, Sharon called. I almost didn't answer, but curiosity got the better of me. Have you lost your mind? She didn't even say hello. Robert just called me crying. Crying, Joanne. He says you're selling everything out from under him. The properties are in my name, Sharon. That's just a technicality, and you know it. Those were his investments, his hard work. You're destroying him out of spite. I was in the kitchen, loading the dishwasher. I wedged the phone between my shoulder and ear, kept placing plates in the rack. Did you know about the apartment in Sylvania? Silence. Sharon? Did you know Robert kept an apartment in the 90s? That he was having an affair while I was home with Dylan? More silence. Then quietly, that was a long time ago, Joanne. You knew. He made a mistake. He came back to you. You forgave him. I never knew about it to forgive it. Well, now you're just being difficult. Robert provided for you for 40 years. He gave you a good life. And this is how you repay him? By taking everything? I closed the dishwasher. I'm taking what's mine. You're being vindictive and cruel. Mother would be... I hung up, blocked her number too. The silence that followed felt like a gift. Karen called that afternoon with news. The Toledo Blade wants to do a story. Local woman sells multi-million-dollar portfolio. They're calling it a major development deal. They want to interview you. No interviews. Are you sure? This could be good publicity. You could control the narrative. I don't need to control anything. I just need to be done. But the story ran anyway. Without my interview, they interviewed Marcus Webb instead. He talked about the heights at Toledo, about revitalizing the Highway 475 corridor, about his vision for luxury living in Toledo, and he mentioned briefly that he'd purchased the land from a local property owner who'd held it for over 30 years. The article appeared on Thursday morning. By Thursday afternoon, everyone knew. Mrs. Henderson knocked on my door holding a copy of the newspaper. "Joanne, is this you? You sold all those properties?" "Yes, good for you," she said. And she meant it. I could see it in her eyes. Jerry and I always wondered how Robert afforded all that real estate on what he made. Now we know. It was you all along. Friday morning, I woke up to find Robert's truck parked across the street. He was sitting in the driver's seat, staring at my house, just sitting there, watching. I closed the curtains and called Dylan. "He's outside," I said. "I'll be right there." Dylan arrived 20 minutes later. He parked behind Robert's truck, blocking him in, and walked over to his father's window. I watched from the living room window as they talked. Dylan's posture was stiff, defensive. Robert was gesturing wildly. The conversation lasted maybe 5 minutes. Then Dylan walked back to my door, and Robert drove away. "What did you say to him?" I asked when Dylan came inside. "I told him if he comes back here, I'm calling the police. I told him the properties were legally yours, that he had no claim to them, and that if he continued harassing you, I'd testify in court about everything I've seen in those notebooks." Dylan's jaw was tight. "He called me a traitor. I'm sorry. Don't be. He's the traitor. Not me. Not anymore." The closing was scheduled for the first week of June, 60 days from the day I'd accepted Marcus Webb's offer. Karen said it was the smoothest transaction she'd handled in years. No complications, no last-minute issues, just signatures and wire transfers and the quiet transfer of property from one name to another. Robert's lawyer tried to file an injunction 3 days before closing. Emergency motion claiming the properties were marital assets. Karen had it dismissed within 24 hours. The judge looked at the deeds, looked at 40 years of documentation in my name alone, and ruled that Robert had no standing. The night before the closing, I couldn't sleep. I walked through the house, touching walls, remembering. 40 years in this house, Dylan's first steps, Robert's promises, my invisible labor keeping everything running. Tomorrow, I'd have $4, $3 million in the bank. Tomorrow, I'd be free. But tonight, I was still the woman who'd set the table for dinner while her husband walked in with his mistress. Still the woman who'd believed in comfortable. Still the ghost in her own life. I poured a glass of wine and sat on the back porch. The yard was still overgrown, wild and untamed. I liked it better this way. My phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. "You're making a mistake. Those properties were our future, our retirement. You're throwing it all away because your feelings are hurt. Grow up, Joanne." Tessa. She'd gotten my number somehow. I stared at the message for a long time. Then I typed back, "Tell Robert he can watch his future being built from his rented apartment window. Every tower, every building, every piece of the empire I created. And tell him I said thank you for teaching me about ambition." I hit send, blocked the number, and finished my wine. Tomorrow, everything would change. Tonight, I was already someone new. The closing took 45 minutes. I signed my name 23 times. Joanne Marie Delaney, over and over. Each signature transferring another piece of Robert's imagined empire to Marcus Webb's development company. Karen sat beside me, pointing to each line, explaining terms I barely heard. Dylan waited in the lobby. He'd offered to come in, but I needed to do this alone. When the last signature was done, Marcus shook my hand. Congratulations, Mrs. Delaney, and thank you. You've made a wise decision. Wise. I'd spent 40 years making wise decisions that kept me small. This decision felt different. It felt like justice. The wire transfer would hit my account within 24 hours. $4.3 million. I'd already set up 3 separate accounts with Karen's help. Investments, savings, a trust for Dylan's future children, money that would work for me instead of disappearing into Robert's schemes. I walked out of the lawyer's office into June sunshine. Dylan was waiting by his truck, leaning against the hood with his arms crossed. When he saw me, he smiled. How does it feel? Ask me tomorrow, I said, when the money clears. We went to lunch at a diner near the highway, the kind of place Robert would never eat at because the coffee came in thick white mugs and the menu was laminated. I ordered a burger. Dylan got the meatloaf special. Dad called me this morning, Dylan said, stirring sugar into his coffee. 6 times before I blocked his number. What did he want? To know if I could convince you to reverse the sale. He said there's still time. Said if you back out before the wire transfer, he'd forgive you. Dylan laughed, but there was no humor in it. Forgive you, like you're the one who needs forgiveness. I bit into my burger. It was greasy and perfect. How did he sound? Desperate, angry, mostly desperate. Dylan set down his spoon. He kept saying Tessa was going to leave him if he couldn't provide for her, that she'd only stayed with him because he promised her a certain lifestyle, and without the properties. He has nothing to offer her. Yeah, we ate in silence for a while. The diner was mostly empty. A truck driver at the counter. An elderly couple in the corner booth. Normal people living normal lives, unaware that the woman eating a burger by the window had just sold a fortune in real estate. Do you think she'll actually leave him? Dylan asked. Yes. Good. My phone rang. Unknown number. I let it go to voicemail. It rang again immediately. Different unknown number. He's using different phones, Dylan said, trying to get through. The phone rang 4 more times while we finished lunch. I ignored every call. When we got back to my house, there was a car in the driveway. Not Robert's truck. A silver Honda Accord I didn't recognize. Stay in the truck, I told Dylan. Mom, stay here. I approached the car slowly. The driver's side window was down. A woman sat behind the wheel crying. Not Tessa. Someone older. Mid-50s maybe. Brown hair going gray. She wore scrubs like she'd just come from a hospital shift. She saw me and got out of the car. Mrs. Delaney? Joanne Delaney? Yes. My name is Patricia Morris. She wiped at her eyes. I'm sorry to just show up like this, but I needed to talk to you. About Robert. My stomach went cold. I don't know who you are. I know, that's the problem. She pulled a tissue from her pocket and pressed it to her face. I've been seeing Robert for 3 years. Since before Tessa. We met at a conference in Cleveland. He told me he was divorced, that his wife had passed away. I thought we were building something real. I couldn't move, couldn't speak. Last week he called me crying, said he'd made a terrible mistake, that he'd left you for someone younger, someone who didn't love him, and now you were selling everything and he had nothing left. He wanted me to take him back. Said we could start fresh if I helped him financially. Patricia laughed bitterly. That's when I realized he never loved me either. I was just another source of money. Another woman stupid enough to believe his lies. Dylan had gotten out of the truck. He stood beside me now, his hand on my arm. Why are you telling me this? I asked. Because you deserve to know what kind of man you were married to. What kind of man you're finally free from. Patricia got back in her car, and because I wanted to say I'm sorry. For being part of his deception, even if I didn't know it. She drove away before I could respond. I stood in my driveway, watching her car disappear down Maple Street. The same street where Robert had driven away with Tessa 6 weeks ago. The same street where I'd lived for 40 years, invisible and comfortable. Mom, Dylan's voice was gentle. Are you okay? 3 years, I said. He was with her for 3 years while planning to leave me for Tessa. How many others were there, Dylan? How many women did he use while I kept his books and managed his properties and raised his son? I don't know. I was never enough. Not smart enough. Not ambitious enough. Not young enough. I turned to look at my son, but it was never about me, was it? I could have been anyone. Any woman willing to sign her name to his debts and her life to his lies. Dylan pulled me into a hug. I let myself cry against his shoulder. 40 years of trying to be enough for a man who'd never valued me at all. When I finally pulled away, there was another car coming down the street. Robert's truck. He parked behind where Patricia's car had been and got out slowly. He looked terrible, unshaven, his shirt wrinkled, eyes red-rimmed. "Joanne," he called. "Please, I need to talk to you." Dylan stepped forward. "Dad, don't. Stay out of this, Dylan. This is between me and your mother." "There is no me and your mother anymore," I said. My voice was steady. "You made sure of that." Robert moved closer. "I made mistakes. I know that. But selling the properties? Joanne, that's our entire future. Everything we built together. Everything I built. Everything I signed for. Everything I managed while you played real estate mogul with my credit and my name. It was always supposed to be both of ours. You know that." I pulled out my phone and opened the photos I'd taken in the storage unit. The notebook entries, the bank statements from the Sylvania apartment, the evidence of 25 years of documented lies. "I know about Patricia Morris," I said. "I know about the apartment in the 90s. I know about every lie, every manipulation, every time you used me and called it marriage." Robert's face went white. "Patricia came here? She wanted me to know what kind of man I was finally free from. That's not... She's lying. She's angry because I ended things. Stop." Dylan's voice was sharp. "Just stop lying, Dad. We know everything. We have the records. We have proof. And you have nothing." Robert turned on his son. "This is your fault. You were supposed to keep her calm. Keep her reasonable. I promised you that duplex. I promised you security. And you threw it away for what? To be her hero? To be her son," Dylan said quietly. "Something I forgot how to be while you were teaching me to see my own mother as an obstacle." Robert lunged forward. Not at Dylan. At me. He grabbed my arm, his fingers digging in. "You don't understand what you've done. Tessa left. Patricia won't return my calls. I have $3,000 in the bank and rent due next week. You've destroyed me." Dylan pulled him off. Physically pulled his father's hand from my arm and shoved him backward. "Touch her again and I call the police," Dylan said. "Leave. Now. She's my wife. She was your wife. Now she's the woman who owns nothing you can steal anymore." Robert looked at me, really looked at me, and I saw something I'd never seen before. Fear. Pure animal fear. Not of me. Of his future. Of being alone and broke and irrelevant. "Please," he whispered. "Joanne, please. I'll do anything. I'll sign whatever papers you want. I'll admit everything. Just give me something. Anything. I can't lose everything." I thought about 40 years of setting tables he never came home to. 40 years of managing books for properties I'd never benefit from. 40 years of being comfortable while he built empires on my back. "You're not losing everything, Robert," I said. "You're losing what was never yours to begin with." He stood there, swaying slightly. Then he turned and walked back to his truck, got in, sat there with his hands on the steering wheel, not starting the engine. Dylan and I went inside. We watched through the window as Robert finally started his truck and drove away. "Do you think he'll be okay?" Dylan asked. "Eventually," I said. "People like your father always land on their feet. They find someone new to use. What about us? Will we be okay?" I looked at my son, my complicated, redeemed son. "Yes," I said. "We will." The wire transfer cleared on a Tuesday morning. I was sitting at my kitchen table with coffee when my phone buzzed. A notification from the bank. I opened the app and stared at the number. $4,300,000. G0. More money than I'd ever imagined having. More money than I knew what to do with. I sat there for 20 minutes just looking at that number. Then I called Dylan. "It cleared," I said when he answered. "Mom, that's incredible. How do you feel?" Terrified. He laughed. That's normal. You want me to come over? No, I need to do something first. I hung up and called my bank. Requested a meeting with a financial advisor. Made an appointment for that afternoon. Then I called a different number. One I'd been thinking about for days. Joanne Delaney speaking. It's Mom. What's your address? He gave it to me. I grabbed my purse and keys and drove across town to the apartment complex where my son lived. 3rd floor, Unit 312. He opened the door, looking confused. I thought you said you didn't need me to come over. I didn't, but I need to talk to you about something. I walked past him into the small living room. The furniture was old, hand-me-downs and thrift store finds. The carpet was stained, the walls needed paint. How much do you owe? What? Credit cards? Student loans? Car payment? How much debt do you have? Dylan sat down slowly on his worn couch. Mom, you don't have to answer the question. He rubbed his face. About $47,000. Credit cards mostly. And the car loan. I've been trying to pay it down, but with rent and everything. I pulled out my phone and opened my banking app. Transferred $50,000 to his checking account. The transaction took 30 seconds. Check your bank, I said. He pulled out his phone, stared at the screen, looked up at me with his mouth open. Mom, what did you... I can't accept this. You already did. Pay off your debts, all of them. And don't thank me. This isn't a gift. This is me being the mother I should have been when your father was teaching you to see me as an ATM machine. I don't understand. I sat down beside him. Your father promised you a duplex if you'd help him manipulate me. But the only reason he had anything to promise was because I spent 40 years building it. So if anyone was going to help you, it should have been me all along. Not as a bribe. As your mother. Dylan's eyes were wet. I don't deserve this. Maybe not. But you chose to come back. You chose to see the truth. You chose your mother over your father's lies. That counts for something. He hugged me then, tight and desperate. Thank you, he whispered. Thank you. I left his apartment feeling lighter. The money barely made a dent in my new fortune, but watching Dylan's face had been worth more than any number in a bank account. The financial advisor's name was Rachel Kim. She was 42, sharp, and didn't waste time with small talk. We sat in her office for 2 hours, mapping out investments, retirement accounts, trust funds. By the end, I had a plan, a real plan, not for comfort, for freedom. You're set for life, Rachel said as I gathered my papers. Even if you never worked another day. But have you thought about what you want to do? How you want to spend your time? I hadn't. For 40 years, my time had belonged to Robert's empire, to Dylan's needs, to the invisible labor of keeping everyone else's life running smoothly. Now, suddenly, time was mine. I'll figure it out, I said. I drove home through Toledo's summer streets, past the strip mall on Bancroft that was no longer mine, past the duplex near the university where Dylan would never live, past the vacant lot on Highway 475, where Marcus Webb's construction crews were already clearing ground. When I got home, there was a package on my porch. No return address. I brought it inside and opened it carefully. Inside was a framed photo. Robert and Tessa. Someone had drawn devil horns on Robert's head in red marker. There was a note underneath in Tessa's handwriting. Joanne, I wanted you to know I left him. You were right. He had nothing to offer but promises he couldn't keep. I wasted a year of my life on a man who used women like credit cards. I hope you're happy with your millions. You earned them. T. I stared at the photo for a long time. Then I threw it in the trash, frame and all. That weekend, I put my house on the market. The house where I'd raised Dylan, where I'd been comfortable for 40 years, where Robert had walked in with his mistress and told me I lacked ambition. The realtor said I could get $425,000 for it. I accepted the first offer that came in at asking price, sold it to a young couple expecting their first baby. They loved the backyard, said it was perfect for children. I closed on the house 30 days later. While I was packing, I found a box of old photos in the attic. Wedding pictures. Dylan's baby photos. 40 years of documented happiness that hadn't been real. I took them to Dylan's apartment. These are yours if you want them, I said. I don't need them anymore. He looked through the box, pulled out a few photos. Mom, what are you going to do now? Where are you going to live? Cleveland, I said. I bought a condo downtown, 2 bedrooms, top floor. I close next week. Cleveland? That's an hour away. 45 minutes, I corrected. And yes, I need distance, new city, new life, new Joanne. Can I visit? Every Sunday if you want. I'll make dinner. He smiled. Pot roast? If that's what you want. The condo in Cleveland was everything my old house wasn't. Modern, clean, mine. Floor-to-ceiling windows with a view of Lake Erie. A kitchen with new appliances. Hardwood floors that didn't creak. No memories hiding in the corners. I moved in on a Saturday in August. Dylan helped. We spent the day unpacking boxes, hanging pictures, making the space feel like home. When everything was done, we ordered pizza and sat on my new couch, looking out at the lake. "This is nice, Mom," Dylan said. "Really nice." "It is. Have you heard from Dad?" "No, have you?" "He called last week. Asked if I could loan him money." I said no. Good. We ate our pizza in comfortable silence. The kind of silence that meant we didn't need to fill every moment with words. We were learning how to be family again. Real family. Not the performance we'd put on for Robert's benefit. Dylan left around 8. Hugged me goodbye. Promised to come back next Sunday. I watched him drive away, then walked out onto my balcony. The sun was setting over Lake Erie, turning the water gold and pink. Below, the city hummed with life. Cars and people and the normal chaos of a Saturday night. I leaned on the railing and looked east, toward Toledo. Somewhere out there, construction crews were working on Marcus Webb's luxury development, the Heights at Toledo, rising on the land Robert had thought was his, built on the empire I'd created. I imagined Robert in his rented apartment, looking out his window at those rising towers, watching the future he'd promised to Tessa being built with money from properties he'd never actually owned, watching his imagined empire become someone else's reality. The thought made me smile. My phone buzzed. A text from Dylan. "Got home safe. Love you, Mom. Thank you for saving me." I texted back. "Love you too. You saved yourself." Another text came through. Unknown number. I almost deleted it, but something made me open it. "Joanne, this is Sharon. I heard you sold the house and moved to Cleveland. I wanted to apologize for the things I said. You weren't being vindictive. You were being smart. I'm sorry I didn't see it. If you want to talk sometime, I'd like that. Your sister." I stared at the message for a long time. Then I saved Sharon's number and sent a simple reply. Maybe. Someday. I didn't know if I'd ever be ready to forgive my sister, but I'd learned that holding on to anger was its own kind of prison, and I'd been imprisoned long enough. A cool breeze came off the lake. Summer turning toward fall. My first autumn as a free woman. My first season belonging only to myself. I went back inside and poured a glass of wine. Expensive wine. The kind Robert would have said was too fancy for every day. But this wasn't every day. This was the rest of my life. I raised my glass to my reflection in the darkening window. "To ambition," I said softly. "The kind that builds legacies instead of prisons. The kind that creates light instead of darkness. The kind that lets you sleep peacefully, knowing you did the right thing." I drank, savoring the taste. Rich and complex and nothing like comfortable. Outside, Cleveland sparkled in the gathering dusk. Somewhere in Toledo, towers were rising where Robert's dreams used to stand. And here, in this beautiful space I'd bought with money I'd earned through 40 years of invisible labor, I was finally, completely free. The old Joanne would have felt guilty about that. The new Joanne just felt grateful. I finished my wine, washed the glass, and got ready for bed. Tomorrow, I'd start looking into volunteer opportunities. Maybe take a class. Maybe travel. Maybe just sit on my balcony and read books I'd never had time for. I had options now. Choices. Time. Money. Freedom. Everything Robert said I'd never have because I lacked ambition. Turned out, I'd had ambition all along. I'd just been using it to build someone else's empire. Now, I was building my own. And it was going to be magnificent.